Namaste everyone. Myself SK Chitra, Cultural Secretary of this academic year, take great pleasure in welcoming you all for today's event. We are really fortunate to be studying in the school that take care of every need of us in providing platform for us to showcase our talents or arranging for guest lectures with professionals like Preeti Srinivas, the founder of Soul Free, an NGO to help people crippled with spinal injury on ways to handle challenges in life, Mr. Harihara Subramaniam, a research scholar in USA on computational techniques and problem solving, Ms. Arun Krishnamurthy, the founder of an NGO called EFI, who spearheads environmental issues and projects, Ms. Aarti Nair, a project scientist from National Institute of Oceanography, to mention a few. Today, we have Ms. Harini Lakshminarayanan to speak in this interaction. We are indeed thankful to the school management for arranging the same. I am very much thankful for giving us the opportunity of hosting this interactive session. This is the first time where we students interact and anchor an interactive program like this, virtually. We welcome the guest speaker, Ms. Harini Lakshminarayanan, for today's interactive session, Steps to Enter the World of Science and Research. You are a really great inspiration to the students who intend to pursue their higher education and research courses and institutes in abroad. Now, I request our beloved Madam Principal to speak over.
Thank you, Chitra, for those nice words. You have beautifully summed several important events that have happened in the last 1.5 years in our school. Namaste, dear children. It's truly a great pleasure to meet you all. I know it's a Sunday, but still you all managed to come, and this shows the passion that you have for the subject of your choice. Today we have with us Harini Lakshminarayanan, a very young, energetic, enthusiastic, passionate research scholar. I'm not going to speak many things about her as she speaks to you all, as she is going to interact with you all. You are going to understand the kind of what she has done so far in the field of science. But what I would like to mention to all of you is take her as an inspiration. Like Chitra mentioned, we had the opportunity to mention, we had the opportunity to interact with several young people who have taken research as their career choice. And not just finishing a UG and PG and settling with life, but moving forward. So people like Harini or people like Lalita, whom we met last year, another research scholar from Canada, such people are a huge inspiration for very many of you. So if your intention is to do your research, and here is the first hand information where you can get from them. Our job of taking you all to the pond is over. Beyond this, it is for you to understand whether you want to drink or just stare at the pool of water. So beyond this, I have nothing much to add. Especially girls, this is my humble request. Gone are the days where we were told that this is enough, but today's sky is the limit, and many of you are taking up work of your choice. For instance, weeks back we had Rajashila Rajarajan, IRS, a former student of our school. The very reason why I try to bring as many women folks as possible is to make you all understand what everybody is capable of. So it's just a way to introduce you to a world where everything is possible. So with these few words, thank you so much for joining for the session. Thank you, Anandi, for all the energy with which you work, and Sunita. Amazing work these two ladies are doing. I may dream big, but without people like Anandi or Sunita or a small team of people, my dreams will always remain a dream. So that way, I'm extremely glad that I'm blessed to have such wonderful staff members with me who are ready to run along with me. So thank you, my dear children. Good luck to all of you. I hope you all utilize this wonderful opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your kind words, ma'am. Now I request my friend Dilekirani to present the profile of our guest, Ms. Harini Lakshminarayanan.
Thank you, Chitra. Namaste. Happy afternoon, everyone. This is Yasila Kirani, current school people leader. I'm glad to present the profile about today's speaker, Ms. Harini Lakshmi Narayanan, and research scholar. Completed her final year of BTech at Harvard University, USA, did her presentation on her field of research in several IITs in India. Completed her post-graduation in Heidelberg University, Germany. She is now currently pursuing her PhD in University of Zurich, Switzerland, apart from teaching there. She is now working on liquid biopsy, renal cell carcinoma, and prognostic biomarkers. I'm sure this event would be very useful for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilakya. Now we call upon our guest speaker, Ms. Harini, to speak to us.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me here, and I hope that you're able to take away useful information from this session. So thank you very much, Ilakya, for a really nice introduction, and everybody else for your really kind words. So let me quickly share my screen, and then we can get started. All right. So I think you might have entered the talk wanting to know what the different steps to enter the world of research, science and research are. So my name is Harini Lakshmi Narayanan, like she introduced. I am doing my PhD at the University of Zurich. I am in my second year, and I hope that my journey so far will be of any help to you all in making decisions for your future or knowing what avenues lie ahead. So the first thing I have to already tell you all is welcome to the world of science, because you all are science students in some form or the other, and you're already in it. It's not too far away. You already put your foot through the door. It's only a couple more steps for you to become or pursue your career in science in whatever form and you think it's right. So with that, I'd like to already welcome you to the world of science. It's a big world out there. You have so many different opportunities, fields, area of research, be it physics, chemistry, biology, and its various forms that exist, the various interdisciplinary areas that are available for students now. So welcome to the world of science already. I have like a couple of tasks for you. Can you identify the countries that I've marked in the map right now? Maybe someone can unmute themselves and let me know what they think the countries are. At least one of them is very easy to identify.
India.
Number one, India.
Yes. And then does someone else know what the others are?
Number 2 is the United States of America.
Yes. So those two are the easy ones. Now 3 and 4. It's a little bit, you know it. It's not so difficult. Okay, maybe then I can let you know what 3 and 4 are. So why do you think I've presented a world map here? We're talking about science, right? Why am I showing you the world map? So what I want you to understand from this is that when you pursue science, you can actually go around the world. Science is everywhere. We have scientists across all countries, and the world is your oyster when it comes to science, because every country is doing science in different forms, either to improve their own scientific temperament in the country or to add to the world's pool of scientific knowledge. So 1 and 2, you guys guessed, it's India and USA. 3 and 4 is Germany and Switzerland, which are the other 2 countries where I got the chance to spend time when I was doing science. So I wanted to let you all know that when you are pursuing your education, your passion for your subject, your passion for your science can also be taking you around the world, introducing you to different people, introducing you to different cultures. And it's a wonderful opportunity for you to understand the kind of research that happens all across the world. And it's not very hard to do it. So like I was introduced, I did my bachelor's in India. I did a Bachelor of Technology in Biotechnology from Shastra University in Tanjavur. And then I got a chance to go to Harvard in Boston, which is in the USA, for my bachelor thesis. And your bachelor thesis is 6 months of your bachelor degree that is mandatory. So I got a chance to go there as a part of a semester exchange program. And then I got a chance to go to Germany for my master's. So I did a master's in translational medical research from the University of Heidelberg. And then right now I moved a little south from Germany into Switzerland, and I am doing my PhD in cancer biology from the University of Zurich. It's been a really long journey, but also a really short journey, because in hindsight, it seems only like a few years ago that I was in the position you are in, and I had to make the big decisions you have to make as you're graduating school. But it's been a very pleasant journey so far. So before I kind of maybe go into describing what other steps are there for you, I also have like one more task for you guys. Is it possible for you to go to this website and share what areas of STEM, be it science, technology, engineering, mathematics, what areas of these do you think you want to explore as you go into your college and your higher degrees? Please let me know if you need me to share the URL in the chat. I can do that as well. If that
I think
helps.
that would be better and easier.
Yes.
Thank
Let
you.
me just, no problem. All right. So just to kind of gauge what everybody's interests are, and also maybe you can see how many of you are interested in the same thing. Maybe you guys can make decisions together, go to school, universities together. It's always interesting. If you have any difficulties going to menti.com, let me know. It should be fairly easy. You just need to log in, give your 3 areas that you are interested in, and yeah. So I already see some early answers streaming in. Maybe I can share my screen. So let me know what areas of science you want to study further. What areas of science, technology, engineering interest you and fascinate you?
Medicine, Akka.
Yes, put those, all that you can think of, put it in there so that everybody can see it and you know what you think people in your class want to do as well. Can you see my screen with the answers? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Oh, I see some big words in there.
Okay, PhD in science.
Yes, PhD in science, artificial intelligence, machine learning, cardiologist, medicine, research. I see some aeronauticals in there, Air Force and the aircrafts, neurologists. You guys have a very vast areas of interest, which is great. Wonderful. Quantum computing. Wow, guys, amazing. All right. Okay, so let the answers keep trickling in. And meanwhile, I will try to address some of these areas. I personally obviously belong to the area of medical research or biotechnology, but then I can also maybe help you with the other areas. So it's already interesting to see how varied the different inputs are, right? So you have some people who are interested in the physics, in the quantum computing. There are some people who are interested in the computing part of it with regards to machine learning and artificial intelligence. And it's actually not very standalone. Artificial intelligence or machine learning go quite hand in hand today with any other kind of science, because a lot of the research today is driven with artificial intelligence. It's driven with the kind of machine learning that's available, because that eases or fastens sometimes how the kind of data that is produced, the kind of research that is carried out. So it's very interesting to see all of your answers here. I see some of it that are very relevant to me, like medicine or like biotechnology. So I will maybe go a little bit into how my trajectory was before I talk to you about what I actually do. So let me go back to sharing my presentation. All right. Now that we saw all the amazing areas of science and technology and engineering that you want to explore, maybe we can talk about how easily that can be done or what kind of preparation you need for it. So right now, you guys are probably already well aware of how to get into college for your undergraduate because you're in 12th or 11th and you need to enter it in a couple of months. So for India, when you want to do your bachelor's, there are a couple of ways to do it. There's nationalized exams for engineering, like the IIT JEE, and then you have your private entrance exams for colleges. And then, of course, with your board marks, you can also get in through the different government universities that are there, like Jana University, Bharathidasan, whatever. So you have a bunch of all of that as well. So for the IIT JEE or for the private college entrance exams, it's typically an MCQ and it's fairly straightforward. This bit, most people know. But what to do after? So you have gone into college, you've got a bachelor's degree, or you're in your final year, and you have to make a call on whether you want to study further, right? And you decide, okay, I don't want to work already. I want to study. I want to do a master's. I'm really passionate about this one area. How do I do it, right? So in India, there are a couple of ways you can do this. So in India, like for your bachelor entrance exams, like your IIT JEE or your NEET for medicine, there are a couple of entrance exams for your master's degree as well, which is the GATE, which is the graduate aptitude test for engineering. And then you have your IIT JAM, like your IIT JEE, and IIT JAM is specifically for all the IITs in India and for the master's degree there. Then, of course, for depending on any of your colleges, you have your entrance exams. So with this, you can already enter different universities based on your ranking, and you can see what they have to offer you based on your ranking. This is for India. Straightforward. You have exams, let's do it. Great. Overseas as well, sometimes you have to give exams. So for different countries across the world, especially the US, you need something called the graduate exam, a GRE, for applying for masters or for PhDs. The GRE is very typical. You have a basic GRE, which is you go in with your aptitude, you go in with English, and you basically write it, you get a score, and you have to submit that score to universities along with your application. Apart from that, you have the IELTS and TOEFL, which you need. IELTS and TOEFL right here, these are language exams. So the US needs these language exams as well to show that you're proficient in English, because the main medium of education and communication in higher universities there is English. But the interesting part is that a lot of European universities also need TOEFL and IELTS for their master's degrees, because a lot of those typically happen in English, whereas the bachelor degrees, like for instance, in Germany, the bachelor degrees might happen in German. Not all of them happen in English, but the master's degree, most of them happen in English. And there, to prove your proficiency for IELTS or TOEFL, you need, for English, you need to write your IELTS and TOEFL. And if you have a GRE, they consider that as bonus, and then they take it. So after you submit your application, you might still have an entrance exam. So they will go through your application. They'll say, hey, great, you guys are wonderfully qualified. We want you in our university, come. And then they give you another exam, or they could give you an interview. So these are program specific, and they're very dependent on the university. You're done with all of this, you go in, you get a great master's, and then you have to do your PhD. And then it starts all over. So sometimes they might still need a GRE, TOEFL, to apply. And then, of course, there's a lot of interview processing that happens before you actually start your PhD. And in India, if you want to do a PhD, you still can use your GATE score and also your IIT JAM. Sometimes they offer like a master's with a PhD, so then that's already useful. So in India, like specifically to biotech, there are a couple of places which are hubs for biotech research right now. And some of that takes you all over the country, right? You start from Chennai, where you are right now. You could go all the way to Delhi. Bangalore is a huge hub for biotechnology and biological research. So is Hyderabad, Mumbai, Delhi, Pune, Trivandrum. At the end of my presentation, I will share a link in the chat where you find a list of all the research institutes in India for biological sciences. And these are typically funded by the government, right? So you have the Department of Science, you have the Department of Biotechnology, you have CSIR, the Indian Council of Medical Research, and these typically provide the funding. So if you're going for your master's degree, you're doing research, or your PhD and you're doing research, you're spending a lot of chemicals, you're spending a lot of reagents, just using lab space. Sometimes for a PhD, you get paid, right, for all the work you're doing. So someone has to pay this bill. Who pays it? The government. So you have DST, DBT, CSIR, ICMR who come in and help you fund. And right here is the link I was talking to you about, and I will put that in the chat at the end of the presentation. So these are some places where there is biotech in India, and this list has a very comprehensive list, and you have a lot of universities and research institutes there. So across the world, these are some of the top universities right now for biological sciences. Oxford, which is in UK, you have Stanford, you have Harvard, MIT, all of which is in the US. You have ETH Zurich here, which is a sister university to University of Zurich, where I'm studying. And I'm studying in the life science program here, which is a collaboration between the two. So a good way for you to identify what are the top universities in the world is with these two metrics. It's the Times World University Ranking and the QS World University Ranking. So these ranking service providers basically list all the universities based on certain parameters, based on how is the student's life there, how is research there, how good is you have to publish papers, right? After you do your research, you let the world know that you've done research. And that's basically publication of papers. So how good is the papers that is being published there? How good is like the teaching that is there? How good are the faculty there? So they consider all of this and then give you the ranking. So these two rankings are very useful for the Times and the QS. So now that I've kind of given you a quick overview of what really goes on to getting to a PhD, maybe I can tell you what points you should consider. So how do you start? Right now I've told you it's easy to map it out, but it differs from person to person, right? So what is your particular interest? And you guys already answered it, a lot of you. Some of you said quantum computing, someone said machine learning, all very interesting fields of research right now. And a lot of it is happening even here in Zurich, like machine learning, my friends use it, my colleagues use it for all of their projects, and it drives their projects so fast. So you find out what your interest is, and it doesn't need to be super specific like machine learning. It can also be something like, hey, I want to go do some biotechnology, and I will find out what that is. And that's perfectly fine, right? And then you find out what universities are available. So I gave you some pointers on how you can find that out. I gave you a list for biological universities, and then there is also the QS ranking and the Times ranking, right? What universities are available. And then are there any administrative constraints? So this might be something you have to consider if you're going outside the country, because visa and things like that are sometimes a problem, and you have to find out if you're a suitable candidate for this country. And then what exams do I need? Like, do I need a GRE? Do I need a TOEFL? Do I need something else, or do I not need any of it? And if you come to countries like Germany, sometimes they might ask you to learn a little bit of German. You need to have certification at maybe A2 level or B1 level. So how will my research and studies be funded? So I told you in India that the TST, DBT, CSIR, ICMR do a lot of the funding for biological research, right? Similarly, you need to find funding if you come to different countries outside India. And there are different ways to do this. And if you're interested, maybe this is too early for you right now, maybe. So when you get there, I'm sure I can help you, or anybody else will also be able to show you good places where you can find out how can I fund my studies. And the most important question, how can I get good internships? And this is very important for you in your bachelor degree as well, right? Because the more internships you have, the more time you get to spend doing research in whatever field, physics, chemistry, biology, whatever it might be, the more time you get to spend doing research. And that's helpful, because when you apply for a master's, or even after, if you want to get a work, they'll be like, hey, this person knows how to be in a lab without breaking a couple of glass beakers, So this person knows how to be in a lab, and maybe this person is then a good fit for our position. And the most important, how good are my program coordinators if you're doing a master's? And if you're doing a PhD, it's very important to have a good supervisor, because they're going to help you through and through. Like you have such good teachers here in school, you need really good supervisors and program coordinators for your master's and your PhD as well. And then finally, a very good pointer of how useful the program has been for previous students is to know what the alumni are doing. It's good to know where they are gone after doing this particular course, how they have taken their career forward, because that helps you understand what opportunities you have. And now that I've told you all of this, you might be wondering, okay, you've given me so much information, but I want to start small. How can I start? Where can I start? books. Books are your best friends. And I can give you some reading suggestions. What you can do is you read all of this, you kind of get an idea of how science is. And these are very easy books. These are not like your biochemistry textbook that you read and know pathways and things like that. It's a very easy books. And you understand where science is going, how it is useful for the world. You are doing science, all well and good. But if it's not useful for public at the end of the day, then where does your science go, right? So some of these books are very good. For instance, The Emperor of All Maladies that I've listed as the first book in the list. This is my personal favorite because I was very inspired to do cancer biology, which is what I'm doing right now when I read this book. So I read this book in the first year of my college, and this really helped me decide what I want to do in biotechnology, because I was sure I want to do biotechnology, but what in it? And this book somehow really cemented what I wanted to do biotechnology. And in Phantoms in the Brain right here, Phantoms in the Brain, this book I read when I was in 12th standard. These are easy books. You don't need to know a lot of science for it. They teach you the science. And these are stories that are being told for you, and it's very easy. So I read this book, Phantoms in the Brain, when I was in 12th standard because we had to do a biology project in school. And I based my biology project off this book. And I think these books will really help you. So here I've listed some biology books and some physics books. So Brief Answer to Big Questions by Stephen Hawking and A Brief History of Time. These are two great books, and I would completely recommend this to everybody. And my personal favorite is The Emperor of All Maladies, for very obvious reason of landing me my PhD. So books, right? Books are your best friends. Start here. And these are limited to physics and biology, right? But there are so many books out there that talk about how data is playing a role in today's world. If you're interested in data science, how chemistry is useful for us. There are several books out there. A little bit of Googling and you'll find out exactly what you want to read for leisure as well. The second thing, network, right? Talk to everyone. It helps to talk. Talk to everyone, talk to your seniors, talk to your family, friends, or any other connections that you might have. And they might tell you, suddenly, you know, somebody who's doing something super novel. Like for instance, yesterday I came across someone who's doing who's a computational linguist. I didn't know what that meant till yesterday, but then I spoke to them and they told me, yeah, so we work with language and we work with data. And then you have your Alexa or you have your Siri. And it's wonderful. You will not find this unless you go asking, right? So talk to everyone. And find a good mentor in college, already in your bachelor degree. When you go to college, make sure you get a good mentor for yourself who will help you with your bachelor's and also with your master applications, with helping you find out research areas that you're interested in. And also if they have a research lab, they will help you with like giving you a project in your bachelor's itself. So find a good mentor in college. But the most important bit is that you have to be curious, right? You have to be curious. You have to be open to opportunity. It is okay for you to be going in, asking people questions. If you're seeing people talking and you don't know what they're talking about, you're part of the conversation, go up to them, ask them, I don't understand what you're talking. Can you explain it in super brief bits, right? And then you already have a great starting point, because once you're curious, once you know that there is opportunity and I'm open to having that opportunity, they will help you as well. Right? So this is my quick step-by-step guide to entering the world of science and research. But like I said, you're already in the world of science because you are science students. So welcome to the world of science. You're already here. You have one foot through the door. You just need to get yourself completely through it if you want to, right? So this is my quick talk of how to enter the world of science and research. I thought I would also briefly talk to you about what I do. But only verbally, not with slides, because maybe that's a little too much already for this stage. But I work with cancer biology, and I work with a specific kind of cancer, which is the kidney cancer, right? We have two of it in our body, one on each side. We can work with one, but two is essential. So I work with kidney cancer, and I am trying to develop biomarkers. Biomarkers are basically like Christmas lights in a tree, in a Christmas tree. Imagine it that way, where they tell you that, or like a lighthouse in the beach. They tell you that, hey, this is where the shore is. So biomarkers will tell you, hey, this is what the cancer is. So I work with developing these lighthouses, and I'm trying to develop this out of blood. So like how you go to the lab and you give a blood test to find out what your sugar level is, or what whether you have enough hemoglobin. One day, already for some other cancers like breast cancer, but one day even for kidney cancer, you can go to the clinic. If there is a patient, they can go to the clinic. And after the doctor tells them, hey, you might have kidney cancer, why don't you go to the clinic and get tested? They can go give a sample of blood. And then we look at the blood and tell them, you have this stage, maybe this is the treatment you need. So that is the science I am doing in its simplistic form. And I hope that this is what you came in expecting the talk to be about, and that I helped you a little bit with how you can strategize your research career. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I already have some questions from some of you, so maybe I can go through it one by one, right?
Yes, Akka. It
Okay,
was
great.
really fascinating to interact with you, Akka. You are so calm and you interact with us in a very nice manner. Now we all are eagerly waiting to ask you questions. Here's my first question to you, Akka.
Yes.
Everybody is fascinated about studying in abroad, right? But I want to know which is the best, whether studying in India or abroad.
So this is something that is very case specific, right? So for each person, it will change. There is no difference, I would say, in terms of what you can do personally, either in India or abroad. Both are equally good. So then you can ask me that, Harini, why are you not in India? Why are you abroad, right? It's a very easy question to ask. So India has its great advantage. You're with family. You're in a country that you know. You're in a country that you understand. You have a support system. If you leave and go abroad, then you probably don't have that. But in terms of quality of science, it's equally good. There are some great research institutes in India, like IISc and things like IISER and things like that. And they're great research institutes, IITs. The only advantage I see when you move outside the country, and it's a very big advantage, is that you meet a lot of different people, right? And by meeting a lot of different people, I don't mean just like, hey, we're friends, but I mean from like a career point of view. You meet a lot of different people. And if you come back to India at some point and you set up your lab, it's important for you to have connections. It's important for you to have connections around the world who can help you propel your science. Because at the end of the day, if you do science here, only Indians are not going to read it, right? Everyone around the world will read it. It will be useful everywhere else around the world. For instance, the diabetes tests that we do in India is not developed in India saying, hey, we want it only for India. So science is international. And so if you are interested if you have the means, if you're able to, like I said, get the funding, because that's the big difficulty when you're moving outside the country, right? If you're able to get funding, there are different scholarships and fellowships you can apply for. And if you're able to get it, I would say go outside, because then you have a bigger network. You have the chance to meet a lot more different people and build those connections. So for instance, the lab I did my bachelor thesis in Harvard, I'm still connected to that supervisor, and we are still doing work together remotely, although because I'm here and he is there, we do different types of work that can be done remotely. So it's always important to maintain the connections and make the connections. And for that, I would definitely say moving abroad is better. But India, nonetheless, has really good research. We have some premier research institutes, and we also have fairly good funding. Some logistical hurdles will be there, but that can be overcome with a little bit of grit.
Okay, Akka. Thank you so much for giving us lots of information which are useful and helpful to us. I never knew about these before. Thank you so much. Now I request Harini, former Cultural Secretary of Grade 12, to take over. Over to you, Harini Akka.
Hi, Akka. Thank you so much for your suggestions, because I was so doubtful of. I actually love to study abroad, and thank you for your suggestions about books. I will really read all those books which you suggested to us. And here's my question to you, Akka. You did your PG in Germany, and now you're doing your PhD in Switzerland. You might have came across a lot of obstacles, right? So can you narrate a few?
Okay. So for me, in terms of obstacles, the first one when I moved to Germany was the language, right? I did not learn German in school, and I did not have a certification because I didn't need it for my master's. But then when you move to a country, the country speaks German, and I needed that. That's the most obvious obstacle that will come to anybody's way. But beyond that, in terms of science, the obstacle that I faced would be that when you're doing research in India at a bachelor level, I finished my bachelor's and I went to master's right there. So at the bachelor level, when you're doing your thesis or when you're in the country, you are a lot of times being told what you have to do. And in your master's also, to quite a bit of a degree, you're told what you need to do. You're told, do this experiment, you might get this result. If you get this result, then that's what we are hypothesizing. We're hypothesizing that this is what we want to see and you'll see this, right? So to a certain degree, that's easy. You are being told what you have to do, you do it. But then when you go to your PhD, no one tells you any longer what you need to do. You need to tell them, this is what I want to do. So I need to go to my supervisor and tell them, hey, listen, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to do it. Can I do it? Can you give me the money to do it? And they'll be like, yeah, fine. And then you'll start doing it. And then you might realize that you're not able to do it like how you wanted to. You start an experiment and the experiment never finishes, or the experiment never works. Like for instance, you're titrating in the lab. It's turning pink faster than you want it to, or it's not turning pink at all, but you want it to turn pink, right? So that's how it feels when you start a PhD, because no one is no longer telling you this is what you need to do. You go to the supervisor and say, this is what the research I want to do. This is my question. This is my hypothesis. I want to prove it. Can you tell me how to prove it? They'll give some rough ideas. And then you have to start developing on those ideas. And that is the difficult bit in a PhD. In a master's degree level also, it's still easy. Once you go to a bachelor thesis, which is 6 months, there you already have a rough understanding of how it works. And then the master's is similar to that, but a little more tedious, a little more experiments you'll do, more questions you'll ask. But in a PhD, it just completely changes, because you have to ask the questions, you have to design the experiments. No one will tell you this is how it has to be done. So that is something you have to be prepared for. In that, this is how it will change when you move from a bachelor level to a PhD level. And of course, if you move out of the country, like when I moved to Germany or Switzerland, you have the cultural differences that come. For instance, there is no one who speaks Tamil. I do not get Indian food as frequently as I want. But these are all like living troubles that I have. They're not so much related to science.
Thank you, Akka. I had a lot of doubts about this when we go abroad to study. And thank you so much for your answer, Akka. So now we have Shreya, the formal school pupil leader, to ask a question.
Hi, Akka.
Hello.
Hi. How do we prepare for exams when we intend to study abroad, and how is it different studying abroad from India?
Okay. So the first part of the question, what you have to prepare for. So I listed some of the exams that you can take, right? So for this, for GRE, for instance, there are several centers that give you coaching, like how you have coaching for IIT, JEE or NEET. They give you coaching 1 month preparation. It's fine. But it's not like subject oriented like IIT, JEE or NEET, where you have a lot of like biology or physics or chemistry or anything of that sort. GRE is mainly aptitude. So you don't actually need to go to a coaching center also for it. You can get these books online and then you can just practice by yourself. You need to learn a little bit of fancy English, like poetic English, not English that we speak on a daily basis. You'll be sitting there and you go to college, you'll see a lot of your seniors doing this. They'll all be sitting there with flashcards with English words on the words on one side and the meaning on the other side, because these are not words you use on a daily basis. But nonetheless, you need to know these words. So these GRE words you learn, and then you learn the aptitude, and then you can go write it. You get some mark, and then you have to let the college know that this is the mark you've got. And then they will tell you if you want them or not. For TOEFL and IELTS is also similar. These are language exams. These are English exams. So purely based on the English language itself. And all of these are MCQs. So it's not so difficult. And because if you are speaking English on a daily basis, where you're comfortable with a working level of proficiency, then the TOEFL and IELTS will also be fairly easy for you. The only obstacle might be the GRE, where there are words that you don't use on a daily basis that pop up. And then those you need to really know the meaning of. But otherwise, these are fairly straightforward exams. You don't need like years or months of coaching like you need for IIT, JEE or NEET. This is for the exams that are outside the country, right? For any inside the country like GATE or IIT JAM, these are subject exams. So you have GATE for different subjects. You have GATE for biotechnology, you have GATE for life sciences, you have GATE for mechanical engineering and things like that. And this is subject. So this is based on the 4 years of subject education that you have in your undergraduate. This exam is based completely on that. So this is very subjective and you will have subject questions in that. You will need a little bit of preparation, maybe 6-7 months of preparation for it. If you take if you are going from college, then maybe the last semester or the semester before that, you might need to prepare for it if you want to write it and start immediately without taking a break. I took a break of 1 year because I was working in IIT Madras. And in that 1 year, I also prepared for like 3-4 months and I wrote it. You don't need too many months, because if you are doing your 4 years and you're confident with your 4 years of syllabus, it should be fairly straightforward, not so difficult. So that was the first question, right? And then your second question, could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
How is it different studying abroad from India?
Yes. So one difference is that you meet people who are very different from you personally, right? So keeping aside that, right, the other difference is a lot of institutes in India right now, the way they approach teaching is very different from the way they approach it outside India. So in India right now, a lot of universities unfortunately don't have like an assignment based or a group project based learning system, whereas outside India, a lot of your work is focused that way. So you'll have a couple of courses, but then most of the courses will require to do assignments extensively. Your grading will be based on assignments only sometimes and not on exams also. It depends from course to course. But that is the difference that is predominantly there between India and outside. And maybe that is also changing now in India. It could change easily by the time you start your master's. For the bachelor's, it was very different because the Indian education system is quite different from like the US education system, so your bachelor's itself, where again, they already start that at a bachelor level. But for the master's level, I can say with confidence that in India, it's a little more exam based, where you have to learn the subject and really write exams and answer questions, whereas outside it's more assignment based. So they'll just tell you that you need to learn this and you have to kind of figure out how to learn it. So you'll always be writing something or reading something.
Thank you so much for your guidelines. It would be surely useful for many of us.
Thank you so much, Akka. You have explained very beautifully and in an easily understandable way. Now we call upon Sir Sarvesh, whose aim is to become a scientist of grade 11, to ask you a question. Over to you, Sarvesh.
Thank you, Chitra. Hi, Akka. My aim is to research in technology. Ka. How to go about what is that I need to do to prepare myself? Ka?
Okay, so technology is a broad field, right, Sarvesh? So maybe when you start going to college, when you go to college, right, in a year from now, you will have to apply to colleges and get there. So maybe a good starting point for you would be to understand which of the technological fields I want to join, right? Because engineering leads to technology and you have lots of engineering fields. So find out what you want, right? Do you want to do computer science? Do you want to do civil? Do you want to do mechanical? Find, kind of focus on that. And then once you enter college, you have different courses. So for supposing you take mechanical engineering or you take biotechnology, right? That's already technology. So maybe I can use that as an example. So you take biotechnology, you go to college, you have different courses, and each of these are focused on one specialization in biotechnology. So over the course of your 4 years or your 3 years in college, you already kind of have an understanding of what areas do I like, do I not like. So by an inclusion exclusion criteria, you already can find out a couple that you like. And then another way would be to take in internships. So every summer break or every winter break in college, try to take internships. Winter breaks are shorter, so summer breaks are longer, and you might get a longer internship in summer. Take the some internships. These internships will really help you because across 4 years, if you do 4 different internships, then you already know 4 different areas that you want to explore or you don't want to explore. And these internships, you'll further find out different kinds of work that they are doing, and it will just branch out. So like I said, network, right? So internships are a good place to do that. And if you do that, then you know these are some more opportunities for me, and this is something that I can pursue. So that is the second way. The third way is once you go to college, join a lab. A lot of colleges have research labs. Join a lab that you think is interesting and start working with them. They will typically ask you to read research papers, understand how research is conducted, understand how the research process works. If that is the technology you're talking about, research in technology, if that's what you're talking about, this is a good way to do it. And then if you join these labs, they will help you with it. They'll guide you with it as well. So I think this at a bachelor level, this is already a good place for you to start. Internships, join a lab, read a lot of research papers, talk to your seniors. And that's a good way for you to enter the world. After you enter the world, then you have your like niche specific seniors or people in your network who can help you with moving further, depending on what masters you need to do. If you want to do a master's, or if you want to enter industry, what jobs are there, what positions are there, and what you need for it. So depending on the niche, then you can broaden.
Thank you, Ka. Before this, I don't know the path to achieve my aim. Now I'm clear, Ka. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Akka. Next, one of my friends, Vijay from class 11, is eagerly waiting for you to ask you a question.
Yes, Vijay.
Hi, Akka. It's very wonderful to hear your speech. Now I have a question. What are the several other courses that we could do apart from MBBS or to do some medical related courses?
So you're asking a very relevant question because I did my master's in medical research, right? So you can do MBBS, which is the very clinical part of research, medical science, or you can take biotechnology for your bachelor's. That will help you with doing the research bit that the doctors then implement. And then you can do a master's in different areas of biotechnology, like molecular biology or whatever else. Or you can also do a broader course like I did with medical research. You can take your bachelor's in different specific areas of biotechnology or biology, like microbiology or biochemistry or molecular biology. And if you take these things, you will not do patient work. You will not be a doctor where you are going to the clinic and diagnosing patients, but you will do the back end of it, by which I mean you will do the research. You can find the drug that the doctor then prescribes, right? So you can take medical research, you can take biotechnology. Bioengineering is also useful. Bioengineering deals with a lot of the instrumentation. So if you go for scans and things like that, it deals with that. It also deals with like prosthetic arms and prosthetic legs that are given to patients who have amputation. It deals with ear implants. So if you can't hear, they give you hearing aids. It works with the development of that. So it depends, right? So if you want to work in the instrumentation bit of it, you can take bioengineering. If you want to work with the science bit of it, life science bit of it, you can take biotechnology or medical research. And some of the bachelor courses also offer specifics, like you can do a BSc in microbiology or a BSc in biochemistry. And then that's also leading you to medical research, not exactly to patients themselves in clinic, but in the general direction. I hope that answered your question, Vijay.
Thank you for your wonderful explanation.
Thank you, Akka. Now we have Ilakya Rani, who is a really good singer, and she's eagerly waiting to ask a question to you, Akka. Over to you, Ilakya.
Yeah. Hello, Akka.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good, Ilakya. How are you?
I'm always super.
Great.
I have a plan to do my higher education in abroad. So it is very useful to get a lot of information from you. And I have an interesting question for you. It is okay to study UG abroad, or it is preferred to go abroad for PG?
So UG abroad it's a good question, right? Because you mostly see people going only for their masters abroad, for their PG or whatever else. For the UG, most people maybe go to the US still for their bachelor's. They write the SAT, which is like the NEET or the IIT JEE, or rather like the GRE. You have the SATs, they write that, and then they go to the US for their bachelor's. So the first question for this, there's nothing like good or bad, right? It's only very case specific. It depends on your position, right? So the first question for someone who wants to do a bachelor's and outside the country is the bachelor's offered in my language? In the US and in Australia, it might be, and in Singapore also. But in Europe, most of the bachelor degrees are in the region's language. So if you come to Germany or you go to France or you go to Italy, the bachelors are going to be in German, French, or Italian. They're not going to be in English, most likely. Most of them, it's like that. And with US or with Australia or with Singapore, it's a question of funding, right? For 4 years, you have to fund yourself. You can find scholarships and fellowships. If you're able to get that for 4 years, it's not a bad idea at all. You should absolutely go. But if you can't, India is already a great place. And I'll tell you why. Because you are just finishing school, you still don't know what all exists. So it's sometimes nice to understand what exists from a comfortable spot, which is India. And in this case, maybe even, it's good to stay in India, understand what it is. And like I said, earlier, that the teaching is different in India and in the US, in a lot of other countries, sometimes in the college level. That difference in teaching can actually also be an advantage, because if in India you're reading and writing exams, you know what the different areas of specializations are that are available, because you have all those courses mandatorily. So if you do all of it, then you're reading it, you're answering questions, you're writing exams, then you also know what exists. So it can actually be an advantage, because then you say across 4 years, I've done 50 courses and I know only 5 of this interest me. If you go outside the country, maybe you don't have 50 courses, maybe it's lesser and you have to already specialize, right? So it's a question you have to consider. Finance, you have to consider that you're going to a new country right after 12th standard. Are you ready for it? But I would say India is a very good place to already be at for your undergraduate level, because you can exploit the education system this way, because you have 50 options. You find out which of it you like the most, and that's already very useful for you. And then the master's level, you can go at that point. You also have the like the competence, the maturity educationally to make your choices.
Thank you for answering my question. It's very useful for me.
I'm glad.
Now we have Kashika Akka. So she's really interested in mathematics and she's here to ask you her question. Up to you, Kashika.
Hi, Ka. It's a great pleasure to have you here. My question is, what inspired you a lot to take science as a passion and to pursue your studies abroad, Ka?
Okay. So it's a very sentimental answer. My grandmother was a scientist. She was a microbiologist, and she was my biggest inspiration to take up biology, right? And then I also wrote an Olympiad when I was in 9th standard. I did well. I was motivated because I did well. So I took it up like that. And to make it specific, why I did cancer biology was, like I said, the book, The Emperor of All Maladies, because I knew when I was going into college that I wanted to do biotechnology, but I didn't know what exactly in biotechnology, because there's a lot that you can do, right? So when I was in college, I was reading this book and I was like, this is so interesting. I mean, this is how people can help the world from the back end. Like Siddhartha Mukherjee, who's the author of that book, is a scientist himself. So he wrote the book in that perspective. And it was really interesting to me that, oh, this is how science helps the world. We are receiving it, but this is how the scientists do it. So it was very interesting for me. And that's how I took cancer biology, which is why I say read, because it is very sometimes helpful.
Thank you, Ka. That was very inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you, Ka. Next, can we have Krishika of grade 11 to ask a question? Krishika, please, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chitra. Hello, Ka. Hope your studying is going well. And my question is, in today's scenario, how do you define science, Ka?
So the textbook definition of science is there. I showed that to you, where you're trying to ask questions and answer it with experiments. But in today's world, I would say science is something that's very useful and very important for the survival of humanity right now, right? Because we have so many catastrophic events happening, be it climate change, be it different diseases right now, which is why we're probably speaking virtually also. So I think science is very important right now for our survival in some capacity. And science is also a lot more interconnected than it was earlier. It's a lot more interdisciplinary now than it was earlier. Earlier, you could be studying biochemistry and know nothing about computing. But today, if you're studying biochemistry, you will use computing sometimes even on a daily basis, right? And that was not the case a couple of years ago. So now I would say that science is a network. It's like a web, a spider's web, where everything is connected to everything else. So it's not like if you choose something now, you will have to never be moving away from it. Inevitably, at some point, you will do something in your science career, in your research, that is very different from what you started doing. I didn't want to work with computers and informatics and coding, but I'm doing that for quite a bit of my PhD now. And that's not something I thought I would be doing a lot more when I started my bachelor's, right? So today's world, science is a lot more, it's like a network, it's like a web, and it's not very standalone.
Thank you, Ka. Your answer is very unique.
Thank you, Akka. So then next we have Surender of class 11 to ask his question.
Hello, Akka.
Hello.
Namaste.
Namaste.
What are the qualifications to become an aeronautical engineer? Is it okay to do it at UG itself?
Yes, absolutely. Why not? A lot of universities are now offering aeronautical engineering and aerospace engineering, right? And it's probably very useful to do it in UG itself, because you could start very traditionally with mechanical and then go to aeronautical or aerospace. But I think when you take an aerospace or aeronautical engineering in your undergraduate itself, there you get 4 years to do it. And then you know a lot more than if you had to start it at your master's level. So of course, absolutely take it. A lot of universities are offering it. So it's not like you don't have the choice also, you have the choice.
Thank you, Akka, for giving this wonderful information.
Thank you, Akka. Now, here is one of my friends asking you a question. Her name is Anushree. She asked, how can I improve myself to pursue my higher studies in the field of space science?
That's a very interesting question. I'm probably not very competent to answer this because I'm doing earth science, not space science. So I think a good starting point would be to do a degree that of course is related to space aeronautical engineering or aerospace engineering. You also actually have space biology, which is interesting. So you might start in biology and end up in space. You never know. NASA does quite a bit of space biology work as well. So I think from my very detached perspective, I would say start with a degree that you think is the most likely to lead you to space in some science, in some sense, in science. So maybe it's physics, maybe that's where you want to start with. You could be studying astronomy. You could start there. You could start with quantum physics and end up in the galaxy. You never know. So I think you need to be a little more specific also on what about space science you want to start, because unfortunately there is no, at least to my knowledge, there is no course that says space sciences and addresses all of this, the biology, physics, the chemistry of it, the engineering aspects of it. I don't think there is that umbrella. So maybe be a little more specific. But then, like I said, you can start with quantum physics and end up with the galaxy. So it's all is possible.
Thank you so much for answering her question, Akka.
And now I have the question of my another friend, Akka. She is Tanuka Shri, and her question is that which branch of physics has more scope in today's modern world?
So someone actually answered this question for her, unless it was she herself. So quantum physics, quantum computing, these are some things that are really like popular right now, that are doing very well. This is my understanding of it, because I have a few colleagues and friends who work with quantum physics and quantum computing. Because computing is becoming such an important thing in today's world, a lot of research is being funded and funneled into understanding how to better it. So that is definitely something that is booming right now. And of course, if you want to like look at it from an engineering perspective, the physics from an engineering perspective, not like pure physics, then there is any and every engineering that is doing so well right now.
Thank you so much, Akka. Now we have Samuel of class 11, and he is interested in animating.
Hello.
My question is there any scope in animation and VFX in future? If it has scope, where can I work, Akka? In India or foreign?
So there is a lot of scope. I'm sorry, finish.
Okay. Second question is, I hear that by doing this course, one can even become an entrepreneur. What is your advice, Akka?
Okay, so let me maybe start with the second question first, because I have a little more I can share on that. So by doing this course, I'm assuming you're meaning biotechnology, or what I have done. Actually, today's world, no matter what research you do, inevitably you can become an entrepreneur, right? Because like I said, unless your research is useful for the general public, you and I, if someone is doing research, it's not useful unless it reaches us in some capacity. So for instance, with my PhD, or someone who's doing a PhD similar to mine, they can also easily become an entrepreneur, because like I said, if I find this lighthouse that I am studying, then I can bring this lighthouse from my lab to the clinic. And for that, I need to sell it. And the entrepreneurship will help me, because then I can design it. I've already designed it. Then if I'm successfully doing it at the end of my PhD, I have my lighthouse, and then I can go take it to different people saying, hey, this is what I want to bring to you. This is what I'm selling. So that is an entrepreneurship arc that you have. Bio-entrepreneurship is very, very possible, and a lot of researchers are doing that now, where they're taking their science and setting it up as a company, focusing on only that. So a lot of new small startups have come up in the COVID time because of a lot of COVID research. So there's a lot of startups that focusing on viral research, on viral technology and viral therapy. And these are becoming startups, and they're selling this therapy or this technology to the clinics and to the general people who will then use it. So entrepreneurship is never off the board. If you have an idea, and that idea can be your original idea from your research, or it can be a collaborative idea with different researchers. If you have an idea, you can always become an entrepreneur, even if you're a scientist. Regarding your first question, which is the VFX, VFX is so popular right now. All the movies, all your games, all of that thing that you keep playing on your phone, all of it is VFX to some degree, right? Graphic designing and VFX. It's very popular, and of course it has a huge future. Now with everything becoming digital, there is going to be higher demand for graphic designers. There is going to be higher demand for any sort of designing opportunities, right? For VFX, all of it. And I guess it depends. I think that there are a lot of good VFX companies in India itself, because I think all the Hollywood movies actually outsource their VFX to India. So India is actually already a good place to be for VFX, if I'm not wrong.
Thank you, Akka, for your advice and clarifying our doubts.
No.
Next, we have Shreya to propose the vote of thanks.
I think we ran over by 4 minutes. I'm so sorry about that.
It is my privilege to offer thanks on this occasion. On behalf of Sri Natesan Vidyasala School, I thank Ms. Harini for giving such a wonderful speech and answering all the queries posed by the students very patiently regarding taking up courses in science and research. Today, we had the opportunity to hear your thoughts, and it was very encouraging for us. And I thank Ma'am Principal and our founder for providing me an opportunity in this session. And I thank all the teachers for joining us in the session, and the students who came forward to ask their questions, and those who were a part of this very informative session. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I hope you had a useful takeaway from this, and I'm sorry that we ran a little over time. You're probably waiting to have your lunch.
No, Akka.